The night I packed a suitcase, I had no intention of leaving forever. I only wanted to know whether my husband would fight for our marriage or let me walk away without looking back. I expected tears, regret, maybe even an apology. Instead, the first phone call he made after I slammed the front door revealed a secret so devastating that I realized I had been living with a stranger for years. My name is Emily, and for 17 years I believed I had the kind of marriage people admired. My husband, Brian, and I lived in a peaceful neighborhood outside Seattle with our 15-year-old son, Mason. We had ordinary routines that made life feel safe. Weekend breakfasts, school events, family vacations, and quiet evenings watching movies together. From the outside we looked like the perfect family. Looking back, I realized we were only perfect because I worked every day to hide the cracks. Brian had changed slowly enough that I almost missed it. His workdays became longer, his phone was never out of reach. He smiled at messages he refused to explain, and every conversation between us became shorter than the one before. Whenever I asked what was bothering him, he blamed pressure at work or the stress of getting older. I wanted to believe him because trusting someone is much easier than accepting they might be lying. Everything shifted after he attended a business conference in California. He returned home with more energy than I had seen in years. He bought new clothes, started going to the gym again, and spent more time looking at himself in the mirror before leaving the house. He even started humming while making coffee every morning. It should have made me happy, but instead it made me nervous because none of that happiness seemed connected to me. Even Mason noticed something was different. One evening while we were cleaning the dinner table together, he quietly asked whether his father was angry with us. Hearing that question broke my heart. I hugged him and promised everything would be okay, even though I had no idea if it would. Children often recognize changes long before adults are willing to admit them. A few days later I met my best friend, Olivia, for lunch. She listened as I described every small change I had noticed over the past several months. She never accused Brian of cheating. Instead, she asked one question that stayed with me all week. If your instincts are wrong, finding the truth will bring peace. But if your instincts are right, how much longer are you willing to ignore them? I drove home thinking about those words until I finally accepted that I needed answers instead of hope. That Friday I created a simple plan. I packed a small suitcase where Brian could easily see it. During dinner I told him I was exhausted from pretending everything was normal. We argued for nearly 20 minutes, although most of the argument came from my pain instead of anger. Finally I grabbed my keys, slammed the front door, and drove away. Instead of leaving town, I parked 3 streets over and waited until every light inside our house settled. Then I quietly entered through the garage, which I had intentionally left unlocked earlier that afternoon. The house was completely silent except for the ticking kitchen clock. I walked upstairs to the guest room where I had hidden an old wireless speaker that connected to another device downstairs. I had tested it earlier while pretending to organize storage boxes. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost convinced myself to leave before hearing anything at all. Then Brian's voice drifted through the speaker. His first words were not filled with sadness or confusion, they were filled with relief. He laughed before saying he thought I had finally reached my breaking point. A few seconds later another voice answered, a woman. Calm, confident, and painfully familiar with my husband. They talked about vacation plans, apartments they had looked at online, and how they would wait until the divorce settled before telling everyone about their relationship. What hurt most was hearing Brian describe our marriage as something that had been over for years while I had spent every day trying to save it. I sat frozen on the floor as tears rolled down my face. Every birthday we celebrated, every family picture hanging on our walls, every promise we had made suddenly felt like scenes from someone else's life. I realized the man speaking downstairs was not the husband I remembered. Maybe he had changed, or maybe I had simply refused to see who he had become. When the conversation ended, I walked downstairs without making a sound. Brian nearly dropped his phone when he saw me standing in the living room. His face lost every bit of color before I said a single word. I calmly told him I had heard everything. At first he denied it, then he blamed stress, after that he blamed loneliness. Finally he blamed me for spending too much time focused on our son instead of our marriage. Listening to him search for excuses hurt almost as much as hearing the phone call itself. Not once did he take responsibility without trying to place part of the blame somewhere else. For the first time in years I interrupted him. I told him that faithful people talk before they betray. Honest people ask for help before they build secret lives with someone else. If he had been unhappy, we could have gone to counseling. We could have argued, we could have separated with honesty. Instead, he chose deception because it was easier than telling the truth. Brian asked for another chance, then another. He promised to end the affair immediately and begged me not to destroy our family. I looked around the room filled with family photographs and realized something important. I was not the person destroying our family. He already had. That night, Brian packed a suitcase and left for a hotel. I locked the front door behind him and cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because I wanted him back, but because I was mourning the future I thought we were building together. The months that followed were difficult, but they were also strangely peaceful. Mason and I slowly created new routines. We cooked dinner together, spent weekends hiking nearby trails, and laughed more than we had in years. The tension that had quietly filled our home disappeared the moment Brian left. I returned to college and completed the teaching degree I had postponed years earlier while supporting Brian's career. Standing in my own classroom for the first time reminded me that dreams never truly disappear. Sometimes they simply wait until we are brave enough to chase them again. Brian continued apologizing for almost a year. He sent flowers, letters, and long messages filled with regret. I believed he was sorry, but regret is not the same thing as trust. Some mistakes permanently change the direction of a life. 2 years later, I accidentally saw him at a grocery store. He looked older than I remembered. We exchanged a polite smile before continuing in opposite directions. There was no anger left inside me, only acceptance. The greatest revenge was not making him suffer. It was building a life so full of peace that his betrayal no longer controlled my future. If there is one lesson my story taught me, it is this. Never ignore the quiet voice inside you simply because the truth feels frightening. Sometimes the answers you fear the most become the very reason you discover your own strength. Losing the person I trusted most felt like the end of my world, but it became the beginning of a life where I finally remembered my own worth.